Welcome to Just Minding My Business Radio, where we are moving at the speed of God, learning what we didn't know we didn't know. I'm your host, Ida Crawford.
And I'm your co-host, Ruth Haskins.
So grab a pen and paper and get ready for information that you can use.
Welcome to Just Minding My Business. Thank you so much for stopping by. We truly appreciate you. Coming to the mic today is shannongrahm-cornell, who is the owner of Better Home Organizing, and her website is betterhomeorganizing.com. She is a professional home organizer who specializes in helping people declutter and organize the physical spaces in their homes, especially during times of transition brought about by life events. Shannon guides her clients through a process of evaluating and curating their spaces, organizing those items that remain, and creating personalized systems that her clients can maintain. Well, welcome, Shannon, to the show. We appreciate you stopping by.
Thank you. I'm really happy to be here.
Absolutely. And I know I have a clutter issue. So I'm sure many of our listeners do. So let me just ask you, how did you get started as a professional organizer?
Well, my background has always been in education. I started out as a teacher and actually as a librarian. So organizing information was always something I enjoyed doing. And in fact, I ended up moving out of the teaching and librarian roles into more of the project management and operations, still serving in higher education, but focusing more on organizing information, organizing processes, and organizing, people and things in that space. And eventually moving into customer success. But something was missing. I was at a crossroads in my professional life and was really starting to look at what would be my next act. And at that very moment, my parents were going through the process of moving into their first retirement home. They'd been living for 12 plus years in a very large home and were needing to make the transition to their first retirement cottage. And I volunteered to help. And it was really during the process of helping them think through their belongings, and planning out their new home that I really discovered that I had a love for this specific kind of organizing work, getting to help people who need assistance with downsizing, decluttering, and organizing their space in response to some kind of life event or transition. So I kind of look at it as the universe figured out Act 2 for me, and I just followed its direction.
Okay. And what would you define? I know you just talked about your parents moving to a smaller space. What other type of life events might have a person downsizing?
Sure. That can happen, honestly, in any phase of life. It can be because you are a newlywed and you are in the process of taking two households and combining them into one. So, the space may not be necessarily a downsize, but you now have duplicates of everything. And so you and your partner may be going through that process of figuring out how do we scale down to one set, our set, and figure out how our spaces are going to now work as a couple. You may actually be needing to do a downsize of sorts, when you're thinking about, adding a baby, or if, a family member is moving into your home, whether that's a sibling or an older parent, needing to rethink how you're using the space in your home to accommodate a new person with, their belongings. It requires a rethinking and an evaluation of your own belongings so that you can accommodate that new person. It could be that you are doing a job transfer and you're moving to a different market where the value of your housing dollar doesn't go as far. And so you may be moving into a smaller space than you're moving from, that, again, would require you to rethink, I have all of this stuff from my prior home, and now I'm needing to fit it into a smaller space. You could also have, obviously, once you get to the empty nesting stage, the kids are gone, you're now moving to, deciding that you don't need the larger home to accommodate that number of family members. You're moving to a smaller space, but now you have things like your kids' memorabilia, your memorabilia that you're wanting to take with you, but move to a smaller footprint for your new home. And then certainly, of course, moving into retirement age or downsizing that might be required because of an illness or the death of a loved one. So really, honestly, any phase of life, of adult life, could require a downsizing process where you're looking at what you have and assessing what you need and just trying to make it fit into a smaller space.
Mm-hmm. And as you was itemizing those different things, one that touched me was the fact, that when me and my husband met, he had his own place, I had my own place, and we decided to combine in one house. And I could definitely relate to, him having a whole set of furniture. I've got living room set. He's got a living room set. And we definitely had to rethink how we was going to habitate together in this one place with everybody having a full house of furniture. So I could definitely relate to that.
Yeah, and that's very common. We usually think of when you're starting out in that phase of life that you're expanding, but actually in that case where you're trying to combine two households, you really do need to retract a little bit. You need to go through and figure out, again, unless you're going to have two of every room, which we don't usually do, you need to make some decisions. So being able to plan that out, and I'm really big on planning. I think that's my background in project management coming through. I'm all about having a plan, how the space is going to be laid out before we start doing anything, before we move anything, before we start sorting anything. Let's have a plan, and then we execute on that plan. I find it's comforting to my clients because they know where we're headed, and we know how we're gonna, they've got a sense of how we're gonna get there. And certainly it helps me just because it gives me my roadmap then that I can follow. And a lot of it is involved with figuring out how you are going to use the space. What activities do you want to do there, and how do we need to set up the space to support those activities? So, I'm glad that was an example that resonated with you.
Yes, absolutely.
Shannon, this is Ruth. Shannon, could you guide us a little bit through the process that you go through? Because it is a lot. And I think our listening audience, myself included, would like an idea of the process of evaluating and curating our spaces and what we have. Because sometimes I live in a one-bedroom apartment. I am single. And when I first moved in here, I had nothing. However, now it's one of those places where I need to get rid of things. It's time to let go. And it can be kind of confusing, and I know sometimes there's a lot of emotional things that go on too. So could you talk to us a little bit about your process that you would take someone through in order to evaluate and curate their space and then be able to organize things?
Yeah, sure. I'd be glad to. So, I find in working with my clients that there are really three main causes of disorganization. And all three of them exist in various amounts. But one is that we ask too much of the container that is our home. Our home is a container. It has limits, and as we just naturally acquire things, we can sometimes overextend the capacity of our homes. So working through getting realistic expectations for what it is our homes can hold is certainly something that we need to work through. Another is that often we find that items don't have a specific designated space in the home. So each item really needs to have a designated place where it belongs, so that if you were to put everything away, there would be a place to put it. And very often, we don't really think about that. We bring stuff into our house and we stick it in whatever spot there's space. It's like, oh, I'll just stick it over here. And
exactly.
Without
that's
really,
it.
Yeah, right. You walk in the door and you drop it, and that's where it lives. And the problem with that is certainly it makes it difficult to find things when you need to look for them again, which is how we end up with duplicates of things. Like, I know I had extra paper towels somewhere, but I don't know where I put them, so I'm just going to buy more, and before you know it, you've got 40 rolls of paper towels. So, knowing where things belong in the home and having a designated, and again, an intentional plan for where things are going to live is something that's really important for being organized. And then really the last one is not having any systems or habits to maintain that organization. So really rules that you create for yourself, or habits that you establish for, here is how I handle X, here is how I handle Y, and following through on those, and really establishing them as a system or a habit that allows you then to maintain your space. So when I come into a space and I'm working with a client, really one of the first things I want to find out is, what's your goal for the space? What is it that you want it to do? What activities do you want it to support you in? I'm a big believer in our things should support the things we do and the person we are. So, what is it that we're trying to do in this space? What's the vision you have? How do you want to feel? What do you want to accomplish? And then what are the things that need to be in that space? And so what we do is we start looking at, all right, so let's say we're working on in your kitchen. So we come into your kitchen, and where's your prep area? Where do you drink coffee in the morning? Do you need a coffee station? Do you when you're wrapping up leftovers to go in the fridge, where do you do that? Where do you tend to bake? Where do you tend to assemble casseroles? That kind of thing. Figuring out where in your kitchen you do these various things. And then planning out what are the things that need to go in those areas that support that activity. So that you end up with zones. You've got your prep zone and your coffee zone and your leftover zone, etc. And once we know that, then we start actually looking at what's in the space now. What do you have there? What kinds of stuff do we have? What categories of stuff? Are there categories, are there things that belong in that category that may be elsewhere in your house? Let's get all those together and think about, those categories of things. Where should this type of stuff live? It may not go where you currently have it. It may be a deal where you've moved into the house, you unpacked, that's where it got put when you unpacked that box, and that's where it's lived ever since. But is that the right place? Is that really where it should go to support the activity you're going to do? So not only where should it go in terms of where will I use it, but then also where will I remember to find it. And then it's the activity of, all right, now that we know all of that, and we've taken the things out of the space that either shouldn't be there, or they're extras, or it's this fancy cooking doodad that, you know, you've never ever used, but it was a wedding gift, or you bought it because it seemed like a good idea at the time, but you've never really used it. Let's get that stuff out of there because it's getting in the way of the things that you need to be able to do what it is you're trying to do in that space. And then let's figure out how to put it away in a way that is easy for you to access, easy for you to put back. Because that's the goal. For me, organizing is all about making it as easy as possible for you to find the things that you need and then be able to put them back as simply as possible. So we work through that process, and it really is going through what do we have, what do we not need, and then figuring out how to put it back in a way that's going to be easy for you to maintain.
Wow. That was Yes, and it's so funny you talked about that. I'm an IT professional, and I am very organized when it comes to how I file my files. You know, because I realize that if 3 months from now, 1 year from now, 2 years from now, if I need to go back to that file, I need to have a quick way of finding it. So I have set up a system in order to be able to keep track of all of the files that I create on my computer. And, you know, I never really, in terms of my home, I've got, like my kitchen, for example. I like everything at that I use on a regular at fingertip, ready to go.
Yep. Yeah, and that's a really good strategy. So, you know, you think about how, how we organize our desks. You know, so back to your example, you know, you don't want to have to get up and go retrieve something that's across the room or on a different floor or in another room every time you want to use it. And so thinking about your space that is within arm's reach as your primary real estate. So if you think about, you know, like within arm's reach, and then like if we're talking about a kitchen space, for example, about, you know, shoulder high to waist high, that space in there is prime real estate. So you want it to be used for the things that you're going to need all the time, quickly. You're not going to want to have to think about it. You're not going to want to have to dig past the quesadilla maker that you never use or the turkey roasting pan that you use, you know, once or twice a year in order to get to that thing you want to put your hand on right away. So it really is about kind of designing that space to really support what you're doing. And you made a really good point about your files. You know, when we think about in most cases, when we think about our workspaces, it's not an emotional thing. It's a very logical thing. We think more logically about our workspace. But with our stuff it's emotional. And, so and that's also part of, but as we're talking, you know, I was talking about going through and figuring out what do we need, what do we not need. That sounds really easy because, I don't need that. Well, but our stuff, that feels different. It's an emotional thing. What an organizer, he's been around forever. His name's Peter Walsh, and I really love him. And he's just, his work is really great. I really recommend him. But one of his quotes that he often says that I love is, stuff has power. And it really does. It really, truly does have power for us. And so thinking through your stuff logically is can be really challenging because it is an emotional thing. And so that's one of the challenges too in this kind of work is that you often have to stop and work through this thing that you're holding in your hand, this quesadilla maker. I don't use it. Well, logically, if you don't use it, then you can get rid of it. But my mother gave it to me, but it was a wedding present, or, a friend gave it to me. Now it has emotional weight to it. It's not just a quesadilla maker that I don't use, therefore, I can put it aside. Someone gave it to me. And so now there's a whole other layer that you have to work through. And that makes the job just really fascinating. And I love helping people work through that, because there are multiple roadblocks. The sentimental or someone gave it to me is one example, but there's others that are kind of our roadblocks for letting go of stuff. But it's fascinating to work with people and help them through that.
Yes, and as you talk about this, I never even thought about it at this level. I've had some stuff that I have emotions behind. Of course, I still have it. I don't use it, but I never thought about it at the level that you're talking about. So now you're making me think about my emotional attachment to some of the stuff that I have.
Yeah. You know what? That's really important. And this is a question I just want to throw out. Shannon, you're talking about the emotional attachment that people have to their stuff. Mm-hmm. Not necessarily things that they need, but stuff. And Americans have a lot of stuff. I think people all over the world have stuff, but we seem to have an amazing amount. My question is, how is this translating into at least where I live, the area I live in Maryland, and in this area, the storage unit business has taken off at an enormous rate.
Absolutely.
Every time you turn around, they're building these humongous storage unit complexes. Where does that figure into what you're talking about? Because it seems amazing that they have that much stuff that they have to take it out of their homes and find someplace else to put it.
Yeah, and that's a real challenge. So, I mentioned earlier about, thinking about our homes. We don't usually think about our homes this way, but our homes are a container, and containers have limits. Mm-hmm. So I often talk about, if you were to make a gallon of chili and you're ready to put put it away in the fridge because we know it's going to be better the next day. But you decide you're going to pour your gallon of chili into a 1-quart storage container. It's not going to fit. The result is not going to be a happy ending for the remainder of your chili. But we don't think of our homes that way in terms of there are limits, because it's our home. Our home should hold all of our stuff because our stuff is special to us. You can't let go of it. It's our stuff. It does have that emotional weight. And so what can happen is that we decide that rather than dealing with it, because again, even though we may know, I really need to get rid of this, it's hard work to do that emotionally. Yes, it's physically hard work too, but emotionally it's hard work. And so one way to deal with it is to not deal with it and put it in a storage facility. And so you think about, you're paying for your home. Your home is storing your things, and so that's costing you money to store, the things that are in your home. But now you're getting a second home for things that you probably aren't even using or even looking at. Because if you were, you wouldn't be wanting to have them as far away from you. Again, back to the things we need, we try to put in within arm's reach. If you're, if you're able to put it in a storage unit, it's not something that you're going to readily need, but it's got emotional weight and you can't let it go. And that becomes really, really a challenge, especially if you're looking at, how you want to be using your finances. You're paying good money to store things that you probably could assess and make some decisions about, and be able to, and also then make decisions about the things that are currently in your home so that you would be able to fold some of those things back into your actual home and be able to get rid of your storage unit. But there was I think it was the LA Times, I'm not entirely sure of the source, but it's a number that's thrown around all over the place, is that the average American home has 300,000 items in it. That's a lot of items. And,
wow.
Yeah. And, you think about if homes are, as we're going through all of these transitions we were talking about earlier, and if we're moving toward, downsizing and moving to smaller spaces, one way of or one way of dealing with not evaluating those 300,000 items is to do the storage unit route. And, that works really well. It can work well in situations where you just need time to do the assessment, but you don't want to have a home that is full of stuff. So you can design your home the way you want it, put the overflow in storage, but temporarily. As a temporary solution, I think that could work if needs be, but certainly not a permanent solution.
Yeah, and as you speak about the temporary solution, I've had to do a temporary solution because when I moved into my house, the space that I was going to use for my office wasn't done yet. It was unfinished. So I had to keep all of my desk and all my office equipment in storage until we actually did the work in the office, because everything had to be built and things like that, and I had no place to put the desk. I mean, it's a huge desk and a credenza, so I had to do a temporary space until we were able to finish up the office space. So that definitely resonated with me when you stated that.
Yeah, and that kind of solution is perfect. I mean, that's exactly what, when that's of value, when you just physically don't have the space to store things temporarily, being able to leverage that external space. That's a lot better than trying to have all your desks set up, in amongst your living room and your dining room, where you're crawling across pieces of furniture. That's not very pleasant either. But to be able to do that, leverage that temporarily, but then be able to move the items back into your home.
Now I have one question for you. Have you ever had a client that had like a hoarder's type mentality? And I'm sure, that's definitely a whole nother can of worms.
Yes. Yeah. So not extreme. Certainly, I've had clients all along, the clutter spectrum, and it is a spectrum. So, but as you get further and further toward the more extreme examples, that is a different situation. So, once you get into that extreme level, that we're now moving into the area of this is actually a disorder. So a person would be diagnosed by a professional, by a therapist, not an organizer, as having a hoarding disorder, and that requires a different level of first of all, it requires a team of professionals to help the person. So that is not something that can be rectified just by bringing in a professional organizer. That is one that requires a situation that requires therapy, and requires usually a professional organizer that has training in working with someone with a hoarding disorder. And there are organizers that specialize in dealing with those extreme situations. I have chosen for my business, I'm dealing with more of what we would experience. We actually call it situational disorganization. So it's disorganization that occurs primarily because of an event, or there's something has happened. There's been a change that has has caused the disorganization. The person might be sort of naturally disorganized, but it's at a much lower level. But yes, there are spectra. There is a spectrum, and but once you get to that far end, it's now out of the realm of just typical disorganization and now into mental illness.
Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
And so in those cases, I do not work on that end. So if I were to have a client come to me, or a potential client come to me, and I recognize that was the situation, I would absolutely refer that that person to an organizer who specializes in dealing with extreme disorganization like hoarding disorders.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So someone who wanted to work with you, how would they get in contact with you?
So definitely through my website. All my contact information is there. So betterhomeorganizing.com. My phone and email and all of my socials are there. So certainly, giving me a call, sending me an email, sending me a text. The process that I usually go through is when someone reaches out, we talk about their project, high level, kind of what it is that they're wanting to do, the rooms that are involved. We talk about what role it is they want me to fulfill. In some cases, when a client works with me, they're working with me side by side, and we're going through all of the objects, in their space, and planning and making decisions and really working very closely together. I've had other clients where they come and they work with me at key decision points, but I do a lot of the collecting and sorting and putting away on my own with their guidance, of course. I can't make decisions on things like what should go and how the space is to be used. I need their brain for that part. But for the the heavy lifting, so to speak, of pulling things out, sorting things, putting things back, if we have any products that we're using to contain items, setting all of that up, I can do a lot of that working on my own. So that happens quite often. But yeah, we basically go through and figure out what the goals are, and then usually that happens over the phone. So we'll start by speaking over the phone, and then if it seems like we're a good fit for each other, then I'll come out to the home and assess. I'll go through and we'll talk more specifically and in more detail. I'll get to see the space, ask some more questions, and at that point, then if it looks like again it's a good fit, and I feel very confident that I can help that client achieve whatever goals they have for the space, then we figure out the scope of the project and start scheduling some dates for us to work together. I usually work in about 4-hour chunks. That's a good amount of time to get the ball rolling and get a really good flow, but not so long that the client's exhausted. There's a lot of decision making that happens, especially at certain points, along the process, and being asked to think through and talk through a lot of objects for really more than 4 hours is just, I've found it to be too much. So that seems to be kind of the sweet spot where, a person is still willing to talk to me at the end of 4 hours. So,
yeah, I can imagine.
It's like, stop asking me if I want to keep this.
Or what? Yeah, I can imagine. I'm just going to throw this out to you, Shannon, because I think it's amazing. What you do is very important and very helpful, and I know there's somebody out there, there are probably many people who are thinking, ooh, I need to get in touch with her. And one of the things that most of us do. And if you notice, you go into, your basic stores now. There's always a huge section that tells you that, you can buy this to organize with and that to organize with. And all of us have things that we have bought to organize. And I'm going to talk about myself. I have organized myself right into disorganization with all these boxes and things that you can buy to organize yourself with. So could you tell me
I'm with you, Ruth.
Yeah, organized right into disorganization. The plastic kingdom is in my living room. Please, I'm sure there are many people who feel the same way.
Yeah, absolutely. And I will tell you, I have the best love-hate relationship with organizing doodads. I love them. They're beautiful. They're clever. They hold so much promise. But to your point, if you buy the wrong thing, guess what they become? They become clutter. So I think this is pretty standard, but my recommendation 100% is product happens last. It is the very, very last thing that you want to do. Not that you don't want to do it, but that you want to do it last in the steps. So the first step is really figuring out what do I have here and what don't I need? What do I want to keep? What do I want to get rid of? And then once you've gone through that process, then you're actually able to say, okay, so now what do I have? What's left? And what's the best way to store it? Sometimes, you might start with, I'll give you a great example. One of my favorite clients, I love her to death. She and I worked on her kitchen. And we started by going through, and by the way, she had a ton of baskets. So we were able to get most of the organizing products that we needed that were already in her home. They just needed to be reused in different ways. But we started in her kitchen and pulled out 5 cheese graters. She had 5 different versions of cheese graters in her kitchen. So you might look at that if you start with the product, I need a basket for my 5 cheese graters, or I need a little bin or something for my 5 cheese graters. We went through the process, and as we looked at the pile of cheese graters, I said, okay, so how often do you grate cheese? And she said, well, I don't. And I said, okay, so, and they were, this one did this fancy thing, and this other one did some other fancy thing. And we finally got it down to, we saved 1 multi-use cheese grater that she had just in case, and we didn't need a bin for the cheese graters at all. That one item just kind of ended up sitting, leaning up against the side of a shelf, and we didn't need a product at all to be able to organize it. Because once we got down to what she really truly needed, it didn't need to be organized. There was one item. So if you start out by buying the baskets, the bins, the drawers, the dividers, the organizers, and you haven't done the work of going through and actually assessing what you need, first of all, you may end up buying the completely wrong stuff. It may or may not fit, and it may or may not serve the purpose. But once you're done with the decluttering process and thinking about, then the best way to store the things, then you make the trip to the store and take your measuring tape with you, measure everything, measure your space at home, and then measure the things at the store. I always get nervous when I'm at the Container Store, which I love, by the way. I love the Container Store. Or I'm at Target, and I see people in the organizing aisles, and they don't have a tape measure with them. That's my one tip. Take your tape measure, take your measurements, and then when you get to the point where you're buying products, measure. Because that's also what you'll do is you'll say, oh, that looks about right, and you get it home, and it's a drawer organizer that is, for a drawer that's 4 inches high, and the drawer that you're working on is 3 inches high. So, but yes, save the product as the last step. And I'm even more cautious than that. I actually like to make do with things I already have. Cardboard boxes left over from Amazon shipping, or, cereal boxes cut down, to try to test out my systems first. Because you can always make your systems prettier. But you can figure out, do I need a basket for this? Or do I need a container for this? And you can put it in a shoebox for a while. And if that really seems to work, then you can go get the pretty basket or the pretty bin to put it in. But you've tried it out. Because you may realize, you know what? It's actually annoying having it in a bin. I would really rather have it be on this shelf over here or in this drawer over there. So you can kind of try out your new system that you've come up with, and then you can make it pretty by going to Target or Walmart or the Container Store or the dollar store, and finding, the cute stuff. Then you can put the things in.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Wow.
Thank you so much.
I'm telling you
a lot of information
on organized.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
Well, I love to talk about it. It is truly a passion, and it makes me happy to get to share about it. So it's been great fun talking to you about it, and really helping people that are and one of the things that I really love about the kind of the niche area that I've picked is, when people are going through transitions and they're going through change, there is even if it's really, really happy, fun change, there is so much to have to deal with, just in terms of new things that you're thinking through, and there may be anxieties and just things that you have to work through. And I can't help with any of that. But what I can help with is giving you a space that is an awesome power base for you, as opposed to just one more thing to have to deal with. So that way you can free up your brain and your heart and your mind and your soul to focus on the amazing things that are happening within that transition, aside from the chaos of my space. So that's one of the things that I really love about this field and what I'm doing, is helping in that arena, doing my little part to let other people focus on their amazing things they're doing. So,
excellent.
I understand.
Oh, Shannon, thank you so much.
Absolutely.
You're welcome.
Now,
You're very welcome.
One other question that I have for you before we wrap up is, if somebody wants to hire a professional organizer, what are some of the questions that they should be asking in order to make sure that the relationship is a fit for them?
Yeah. Well, the one thing I would say for sure as a great starting point is there is a National Association for Organizers. It's called NAPO, N-A-P-O, and it stands for National Association of Productivity and Organizing Professionals. And they have a directory of their members. And I'm a member of NAPO. It's a really great organization, very focused on education for their members. But they also have a code of ethics that all of the organizers adhere to, that is focused on, that they treat their clients confidentially. They don't take on projects that they're not skilled to handle. Kind of, back to our working with someone with hoarding disorder example. Fair pricing, respect for their colleagues, respect for their clients. It's a really great organization. So first, I would recommend starting with the NAPO directory in your area and starting with that list of organizers. But you can also see in the directory, look at their specializations. You can see, if somebody is, for example, if you have a lot of paper in your house, you might want to have an organizer that also specializes in dealing with paper. And there are organizers who specialize in that. They just work in paper, or they work primarily in paper, and they do other organizing as well. So look at their specializations, and that'll really help you kind of zone in on who might be a good match. But definitely check out their website, learn as much as you can about them there, but then talk to them. And when you do, try to be as specific as possible about the work you want done. Like, talk to them about, and they'll probably ask you about this as they're interviewing you as well. But how much, what are your goals for your space, and be as specific as possible. Also, talk about how much you want to work with them, or you want them to do a lot of the work for you. So talk about that, because they may have different philosophies about, I only work side by side with my clients, or I can do a lot of work on my own. That may vary from organizer to organizer. So if you really want someone to come in and do a lot of the heavy lifting for you, make sure that you've got somebody that will do that. Also, get them to talk a little bit about what their organizing philosophy is, and kind of their philosophy of stuff. When I was talking earlier, I said my philosophy of stuff is that our things should support who we are and the person we are and the things we do. Find out what their philosophy is and what their philosophy around organizing is. For example, if you want somebody who really is very minimalist, and you want somebody who has a very high aesthetic for the design at the end of the project. So you want, a pantry, for example, that would be perfect on Pinterest or Instagram. Talk to them about that. If that's what your goal is, you're going to want to find somebody who matches you. Now, most professional organizers can go where their clients are. If you need if they're working with somebody who doesn't necessarily have the same aesthetic they do, they can make that adjustment. That's not a problem. But it's a lot easier if you're already working with somebody who's in alignment with you. So if you're an abundance lover and you love to have things around you, you're not going to want to work with an organizer who's a minimalist. You guys just have different philosophies. So talk about that. Get them to describe some of their projects. Certainly you may be able to see some of the work they've done on their websites, and find that out. And then also find out what other services they provide in addition to the hours they spend in your home. Because a lot of organizers will help you relocate your items. So, if we were talking about kind of the difficulty of letting things go, a lot of times it really helps if you know your items that are leaving your home are being dealt with in a responsible way. And a lot of organizers will help with that. They either offer services themselves, or they partner with other people who offer services to help with responsibly dealing with the items from your home. So whether that's consignment or reselling on eBay or donating to various causes, they'll help with that. Also, do they do shopping for you? In a lot of cases, organizers, if this is something that is of interest to you, they will actually do the shopping for you for the products that meet your aesthetic, that will fit the needs for your home. And then usually what they do is they just have you reimburse them for whatever it costs at the store. And organizers can get discounts from a lot of different places, and they can pass those discounts on to you. So you can ask them about that as well. But I think if you do those kind of questions, you'll end up with a really good fit. And it's an amazing group of people in this industry, and you can hardly go wrong, especially if you work with folks from the national organization. But they're very happy to talk with you about your project and their aesthetic and their philosophy.
Okay. Now, before we wrap up, give the audience your contact information again.
Sure. My website is betterhomeorganizing.com, and all of my information is there. So my phone number is there, as well as my email address. So you can email me at shannon@betterhomeorganizing.com. But you can also find my Facebook page and Instagram and all the social stuff there on the website as well.
Okay. Well, Miss Shannon, you have taken us to a whole nother level.
Well, I love talking to you.
Oh my goodness. I mean, some of the things that you talked about, it is probably, I'm looking at my space and some of the things that you mentioned, I just do it, but I never thought about
Mm.
the process behind it. I just kind of, oh, I need this right here. I need to have this right here. Or I'm the one of the type of people that when I have junk mail and paper and things like that, I just create a pile until I'm able to go through each and every piece of paper. I just can't throw it away right away because things get busy for me, and mail comes every day. So
Sure.
pile it up, and then when I have some time, I'll sit down and I'll go through each and every piece, tear off my dress, put a pile my shredder stuff in one pile, chuck the rest that I don't need, and then file it away. But most of the time, I like to scan it in. If it's important, I scan it in.
Yeah, and what you've described there is a really great example of having a system for how to deal with your mail. So you have these little rules that you've set up for yourself. And, they're your rules. You can, they're yours to enforce for yourself. But that's a system that allows you to stay on top of your mail that comes in. If you don't have a system like that and the mail just gets dropped, on a kitchen counter or, on an entry table as you walk in the house, and there isn't a system to deal with it, that's when things can pile up. But you've got a good example of how you're able to maintain because you've got that system and that habit that you use daily to deal with your mail. That's a great example.
Thank you. But you're making me really think about the processes that I just kind of just do. I don't think about it. But in this conversation with you, you're making me a little bit more conscious of my processes and how I organize things. So thank you.
That's great. Yeah. Oh, you're welcome.
Absolutely. Ruth, is there anything you want to add?
No, I just really appreciated the conversation. There was a lot of information that I know that I can use for myself. Just going through and organizing according to what I need and having things where I want them to be at hand's reach. So there's just a lot of information that I appreciated you sharing. Even I'm thinking about my kitchen, and I know that there's one place in my kitchen that is perfectly organized for me, and that's my spice cabinet. The rest of it can stand some reorganization because my spice cabinet is right where I prep, and that's the most important thing for me. It's right where I prep, and it's right near the stove, so it's perfect, reaching and everything. It's perfect. Some other areas that just really need working on, and where I do conduct my business, my desk area, all of that, I can see how important it is not to be getting up and walking across the room to get things. So, I'm listening, and I'm thinking that all of our listening audience is taking notes. It's like, oh, I need to make changes. Because when you make those changes, I think sometimes you get so used to being uncomfortable that you don't realize that you're uncomfortable. Until you hear a conversation like this from a professional like yourself, and you say, oh, yeah, that makes sense. No wonder I'm so uncomfortable when I'm working in my workspace, or why my bedroom feels uncomfortable, or why my kitchen feels uncomfortable. And though we laughed about the fact that we all run out and buy these, organizing things, most of us have more organizing stuff in our house, and it's become clutter. And we're all, I know the listening audience is going, amen, I have clutter from organizing. Okay. And we don't see it at first. But this conversation really helped bring that to light. Oh, my organizing has created more clutter. So I need to figure out what you brought out, figuring out what you need first, what you need to keep, what you need to get rid of, and the last thing to do is go out and get the product. And most of us have enough product in our houses to take care of matters without buying another thing.
Yep, you summed it up.
I'm just really so appreciative.
Yeah,
I just really enjoyed this conversation so much.
And
very enlightening.
Yes, and what I'm learning from this conversation, clutter can come so quickly, and I think it's one of those kind of things that you have to be constantly conscious and intentional about, because before you know it, you have clutter. It just sort of jumps right in there. So
we have to be willing to get rid of things.
Yes.
Yeah. We have to be willing to get rid of things.
Yeah, because I'm kind of
things every so once in a while.
Oh yeah, because I've kind of created a system where if I haven't worn it in a year, then I don't need it. And I think twice a year, like when the seasons change, I'll go through all my clothes and decide, what I'm going to go ahead and give to Goodwill. I start a Goodwill bag, and I got my guys doing the same thing. If it's too small, if it's, you're not wearing it, then put it in this bag. So I keep the bag for like maybe a month or two in an easy location that everybody can access. So when they're going through their clothes, they can get to the bag, and then I'll just put it in the trunk and then take it to Goodwill. So I'm really proud of myself about that, because I used to have so much stuff. I was like, oh my God, it was like a day's work trying to go through all that stuff. And I was like, you know what, I can't do this.
And that's, again, another good example of a system, especially, and I love your idea, and I recommend to have those donation drop zones in a couple of different places in your home. If you've got room for a basket or some kind of a tub or something on the floor of your closet where, you try something on, you're like, nope, this isn't getting it. It goes right in that tub, and you don't have to rehang it. You don't have to think about it. And it's waiting until the next run to Goodwill or your favorite charity. That makes it so much easier to keep on top of it. So again, another example of a good system that helps you maintain your space and stay on top of the clutter. But you're right, it can sneak in very, very easily. You get a couple of busy days, or, you get sick for a week, and it's just amazing how fast things can get out of control. Yep.
Quickly. Well, Miss Shannon, we're definitely going to have you on again, because, like I said before, you have taken clutter to a whole nother dimension.
Well, I would be happy to come back again. You guys are a delight to talk to. So thank you so much for
you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shannon. It was a real delight.
Yes, it was.
Thank you both.
Thank you to the amazing women of a Sister Circle Empowerment Network, ASCEN LLC, and our media partners. Let Just Minding My Business Media promote your business. For information, visit us at jmmb.asistercircle.org. That's jmmb.asistascircle.org. Voiceovers by RCH VoiceWorks. For when you want to be heard. Call 443-620-4115.
Thank you for tuning in to Just Minding My Business Radio. I'm your host, Ida Crawford.
And I'm your co-host, Ruth Haskins.
We hope you enjoyed the show and appreciate you stopping by. Many blessings to you and yours.